Welcome to the Fully Charged Show podcast. Now, your ears do deceive you. 2 podcasts this week. Yes, 2. Yesterday's was How Far Ahead is Tesla, which had Chelsea Sexton sharing a talk with a whole load of YouTubers, people who really know all about Tesla. They breathe, sleep, eat, speak about Teslas. They know Tesla inside out. So if you've missed that one, don't forget to listen to that one, as they offer valuable opinions on how well Tesla are doing and how well other more legacy OEMs, original equipment manufacturers. It took me about 3 years to work out that's what OEM meant. I never dared say it till I knew what it meant. But people always talk about, oh yeah, well of course the OEMs are in a complete state about that. I didn't know what an OEM was. I know now. Original equipment manufacturer. It's a car maker, or they can make anything. Forget it. Let's move on. So what the OEMs are doing to catch up. Now this podcast, however, is all about busting those EV myths out there. But before we begin, and I'm so excited about this because I think this is the most genius idea since wall-mounted socket chargers for electric cars, which is a fairly mundane idea. This is a genius idea. We have a new sponsor for this show, and they are Charge Fairy. We know historically, some people have resisted buying EVs because, they're like milk floats, or they don't make any sound that makes me feel more masculine, or they're really expensive, or they only go a few miles and they need charging, or you have to throw the battery away after 3 months. All that nonsense aside, one of the real big proper challenges for people who live generally in an urban area with nowhere off the street to park their car, it's about 40% of UK households like that, is how on earth do you have an electric car and charge it regularly without a lot of stress? There are lots of people who live in those situations who use public charging and have no problem at all, and they're very proud of it. But it's still more hassle than if you can charge your car at home. However, Charge Fairy want to offer you a solution. Charge Fairy is offering a subscription charging service designed specifically for people who can't charge at home. So for a flat weekly fee, they remotely monitor a car's state of charge, your car, and they can see when it's starting to get low, and they come and charge it when you're not using it, generally when you're asleep at night. With their rapid DC charger in their electric van, they can get you up to 80% in about 10 minutes. This is mind-boggling stuff. This is brilliant new technology. And also, what do you have to do as the owner of that EV? I'll tell you, it's one simple word: nothing. Nothing. You don't have to drive it anywhere and charge. You don't have to plug it in. You don't have to remember to plug it in. Charge Fairy. Make sure you've always got enough electricity in your car. Every time you get in it, you can drive it. It's probably the most convenient way to charge an EV imaginable. They take care of all of it. Without lifting a finger, you can get into your EV every day knowing there's enough charge. Charge Fairy is the mobile electric charging service for people that value their time. Personally, I don't value my time. I try and waste as much of it as possible, but I know some people like to value it. They are very happy to be able to offer, now, this is where it gets even better. They're going to offer Fully Charged listeners and regen watchers a fabulous discount. If you go to chargefairy.com, ChargeFairy, all one word, .com/fully charged, and sign up to Charge Fairy, and you're in one of their launch areas for the first 2 weeks. All the electricity they put in your car is free. That's right, free electricity. Now, we knew that might just possibly get your attention. So don't forget, chargefairy.com/fully charged for your 2 weeks of free charge. So, with that done, I'm really excited about Charge Fairy, and I'm sure we'll do a show about them because I think it's a genius idea. Let's get into the discussion with Joel Levin from Plug-in America, Russell Corbin from the Electric Auto Association. I'm going to do this again. So with that done, let's get into the discussion, this week's episode, with Joel Levin from Plug-in America, Russell Corbin from Electric Auto Association, and Matt Teske from Chargeway. And finally, Sean Mitchell from All Things EV.
is your favorite myth to bust?
I guess I'll start off. Hi, everyone. I'm Russell Corbin with the Electric Auto Association. And my favorite one is, I guess, the sportiness and the performance. Because some people still, even today, think of electric cars as a advanced golf cart or something. But even non-Teslas, I've test driven so many different electric models, and even really affordable ones like the Chevy Spark, which was mentioned earlier, it packs a punch and it's super fun to drive. So that's a huge one for me.
That's my favorite too. I like torque more than anyone rightfully should.
I would say for me, hi, my name is Sean. I would say for me, it's charging infrastructure. And it's an interesting dichotomy because what people don't realize is that you're doing most of your charging, probably 90 to 95% at home, in your garage, overnight. A lot like a phone. So a lot of people think, oh, I don't see any charging stations, but most charging does happen overnight while you sleep in your garage.
Yeah, tied into that, I would say the notion that they take forever to charge, because people say, well, how long does it take to charge your car? And I say, well, mostly I charge in my driveway, and it takes about 2 seconds, maybe a second, because I plug it in, and I go in and go to sleep, and I wake up the next morning and it's charged. It's a lot like your cell phone. No one ever says, how long does it take to charge your cell phone? It's about the same.
I would say that my favorite myth to bust is just that trying to clarify to people, again, charging is really the number one in my opinion. I will say I don't really agree with telling people charging takes 1 second because then they'll think it. And I think the reality is we have to clarify that in what it means for their user experience. So I think the myth to bust there is just that there is a fuel choice that they don't even know they have. And to me, I think that's the biggest myth to bust because that's what an electric car is. It runs on a new fuel type. And the general public doesn't really know that yet. I mean, Ford proved it with their survey last year with 42% of respondents saying, how do I fill up an electric car? Oh, with gas. So the product that they're buying is actually a new fuel type, and most people don't realize that yet. So I think that's the one I like busting the most.
Excellent point, but I think there is some opportunity to use language to lower some of the barriers. So as much as 1 second might be slightly disingenuous, it does shift the conversation. Similarly, I have found that it helps to say you get this many miles per charging hour or minute on the fast chargers versus saying it takes 8 hours, because that way people can translate it very quickly to their own daily driving. Are there other similar tweaks like that that you have found to be really useful in talking to people that perhaps we should be using more of?
Yeah, a big one that I found is giving examples from personal experience. My family has been driving electric vehicles for a number of years, and so we've gone on road trips. We've plugged in every single night, and so when you tell people, hey, last weekend we drove down to South Carolina, I'm from Maryland, and we told them, it maybe added an hour to our total trip time, but in that time we were able to get coffee, and we were going to do a lunch break anyways. So, instead of giving all these numbers, which people sort of glaze over at numbers sometimes, I think it's really important to give examples and relatable things. That helps a lot.
One other useful thing is, as sort of a tip, is when you're thinking about the cost of an EV, to get away from a focus on the MSRP, what does it cost to buy it, and think about what is the cost to own it? What is like the monthly cost to be in your car, to own your car? And when you start comparing the difference in maintenance and in fuel and in repairs and oil changes and things like that, then it's a lot more meaningful in comparing to EVs to gas cars, and you realize that it's a pretty good value. They're not actually more expensive cars, particularly when you're looking at EVs that can last a really long time. And so it's more useful than just looking at what's the upfront cost.
I would add on top of that, too, it's important for people who are considering electric vehicles to understand what are their needs. People who are helping these electric vehicle buyers buy cars, most people don't drive more than 40 or 50 miles a day. A lot of vehicles will fit that need, but there is a small subset of people, myself included in real estate, that do a lot of driving, 50 to 60,000 miles a year. Understanding the infrastructure in the city that you're in, understanding where those places are at is also important, even though, so I would leave my house with a full day of charge, with a full charge, But if I'm doing a lot of driving with clients and showing houses and having a lot of appointments, I will exhaust that 250 miles that I have on my Model S. Now, some people have told me that I just need to get a new car, a new Tesla, but I'm going to hold tight with my 2013 Model S. Understanding infrastructure is really important. Is where you're at built out enough for your current needs? Most people will be able to satisfy those needs with home charging at home while you sleep. But there might be a small subset of people that drive a little bit more, and it's important to understand what that infrastructure looks like.
And I think it's important to, we often refer to the home charging as the biggest benefit. And those of us who own EVs, we love it all the time. But that's about 50% of the US that actually has that option. In reality, half of the world that we talk to doesn't. And so I think it's always important, as you point out, like, how do you know the infrastructure? And then, again, walking through what that looks like. I think that the visualization of that for people is still very lost. And again, that gets back to how are they filling it up as opposed to what is the car they're choosing. And then within that, the use case is fundamental. And then how do we help auto dealers explain that use case in a way that makes the most sense?
And I think a huge new growing industry that's really related to both affordability and therefore accessibility and also charging is the used market, because there's a growing number of used EVs available. Last year, I got a Kia Soul EV, which has 93 miles of range, and it was perfect for all I needed to do, commuting to school every day, driving all over Maryland. And so for a lot of people who are looking for that $10,000, that $12,000 car, they can get, a second-hand EV that doesn't have 200-300 miles of range, because you don't need that, like you were saying.
One other kind of related thing is that for the use case, many households have two cars, and people sort of forget that. And they're like, well, I need a car that can go X miles because I go on road trips from time to time. So for a household that has two cars, it turns out range doesn't really matter that much unless both your cars are going a long distance every day. So if you have one car that you're just going to use for around town and the other car for road trips, an EV works absolutely adequately. Any EV, even a pretty low range EV, works totally fine for that around town car. And people don't think about that so much because with gas cars, you're not sort of doing that kind of analysis.
What myths are you hearing or struggling with?
I want to address one myth, is that electric cars are okay to be driven by women. Trust me, we can handle that charger to be plugged into the car. On the contrary of the Nissan executive that said, it is difficult for women, for ladies, to handle that charger. It's no problem. So if you are a woman, or if you are a better or second part of the family with a woman in your family and you're considering electric car, it's fine. Here's 6 years been plugging my car and no problem.
I think one of the big myths is the cost. The average Texan drives an F-100 pickup. The average Texan pays way over $50,000 for that vehicle because they want leather and they want this, that, and the other. So I think that's the biggest myth, that these cars are so expensive, only the wealthy. I'm a retired school teacher. What can I say?
One of my favorites is that electric vehicles, since you have to charge them from someplace like a coal-fired power plant, are more polluting than a gas car, which is an absolute ridiculous lie, because that's one point source that's very well regulated versus millions of point sources on gas cars. But the other one this gentleman brought up was, somebody asked him, they said, wait a minute, mining the minerals for the batteries is far more polluting than gas cars, which is a complete laugh. Maybe you could address that.
Yeah, I know of the Union of Concerned Scientists did a study a number of years ago that basically proved that electric cars, from start of production to when they are the end of their life cycle, are better for the environment. They produce less emissions than gasoline equivalent cars. And so the science is there.
It reminds me of a TED Talk that Elon Musk did some years ago where he addressed this question, he talked about how one source of power generation, even if it's coal-fired or any other source, is far more efficient because you can have a stationary piece, and it doesn't matter how much it weighs. Where if you've got gasoline vehicles, you have to factor that into the vehicle. So to have one source that also can regenerate through hydrolysis and other forms, I think it's going to be more efficient. So worst case scenario, and you also have to consider that the grid is getting cleaner and cleaner over a period of time. In power providers are realizing that they can save a lot of money by producing through renewable energies.
Hi, panel. One of my myths that I hear a lot is that the batteries don't last very long. People always go back to, I got a new iPhone. I had to get a new one because the battery wasn't working after a year.
Yeah. I think that there's a misunderstanding, and it probably started with the Prius because the Prius didn't have any sort of thermal management system. It started with that, and then they killed the batteries pretty quickly. But today's electric vehicles are really advanced, far more advanced than what they used to be a long time ago, with the exception of the Nissan Leaf, which is still passively cooled, boo. But active cooling, I think, is really important, and you see that in almost every major electric vehicle, which helps fight against that degradation of the batteries.
To stick up for the Nissan Leaf a little bit, I have a 2015 Leaf that I live in California, so the climate is a little bit more mild. I've had no degradation at all. So with a Leaf, it depends a lot on how you drive and where you live and how you manage it. It's not such a horrible thing. A Leaf can have decent life too.
I think it's important. I mean, there's a lot of us that are EV drivers. We wanted to learn a lot of these details, and we really believe in it. And we want to get the retort we want to have is steeped in the engineering and steeped in the science. And a lot of people that are asking those questions, they don't want to have that answer. They want something simple. And in the same way, you almost have to look at it as how can we bring this down to earth for them? It's like, does your gas tank go bad? Welcome to the year 2020. Your gas tank was invented over a century ago. This is the new way of fueling up.
And it is iterating pretty quickly, too. Very, very quickly. It's almost like television or a mobile phone. You've seen a lot of iterations and improvements over an annual basis.
Oh, totally, yeah.
And on that comparison to gasoline, imagine all the things that don't last in a gasoline car. You've got so many more moving parts, approximately 10 times the moving parts in a gas engine as you do in an electric car. So, when you do that comparison, it's a little unfair to the EV, I think.
Well, we use those talking points a lot, but again, we talk about that because we know that. Most people don't pop the hood on their car. If they pop their hood, they see a gigantic piece of plastic. It looks like a lunch pail. So they go, wow, there's 10,000 moving parts in there. They don't know, they don't care. And so we've got to find a way to bring it down to earth for those people because we know that, but they already don't know that they don't know that.
And I guess on that point of going back to examples, you can ask them, how many times have you taken your gas car into the shop to be fixed? And then we can say, I've never taken my electric car in to have anything fixed on the mechanics of the car.
I think for long-term ownership, that's huge. I think if someone's leasing a car for 3 years, that narrative dies. Yeah, so on the used side, though, for someone who's buying any used plug-in car, that is a huge talking point for those people.
Myth number 78. If everybody drove electric vehicles, the grid would be overpowered. Well, in Seattle, where we are, at Seattle EVA, that study was done over and over again. However, there is a couple caveats that people would charge off-peak. And of course, in many, many states, that's given an incentive by giving different rates to charging. Thank you for all you do.
It turns out that the electric grid, most of the cost of delivering electricity is managing the grid, and the grid is heavily used during the day and relatively quiet at night. And so when EVs are charging at night, in fact, they're making the grid more effectively used, and a lot of utilities have done studies that it actually brings down the average cost of electricity for everybody because you have this big expensive asset that you're not using half the time, and when you use it more at night, it lowers the average cost for everybody.
I think the best example that was given was in the last panel with respect to when air conditioning was introduced to homes, is those do draw a ton when they're turned on. And if you can say, well, how many homes are going out because of air conditioning being on? And that's a great example. That's something people live with. They tangibly understand that my house is cooler, my neighbor's house is cooler, these thousands of homes are cooler, and an EV, if it's plugged in on a level 2 or level 1, is not even creating that same kind of draw. Help them understand tactily like what that does to their life.
There's one thing that I know about capitalism, it's that money will follow the industry, and the industry will follow the money. So if there's a huge opportunity for utilities and power providers to make more money, they're going to figure out that demand problem regardless of whether it's quickly or slowly. And I've been a part of some legislation where the utilities and the power providers are actually lobbying for electric vehicles because it's going to make them money.
Well, that's not universal, though. A lot of them will not see that money on the back end. So the utilities from area to area geographically may say that might work in one state, but for us, we're so regulated, we don't see that additional profit. So it may not work in all places.
All right, great panel. One comment to the woman about the charging. I have a hard time with the Electrify America plugs. Sorry, so yeah, those are really, really heavy to move. Myth, I talk to a lot of people and they always make the comment, electric cars aren't for me. And I always have to have a conversation with them about maybe why it is. Thoughts on how to bust that? I think butts in seats is the way to go.
Butts in seats, amen. Yes, we do. I'm a Plug in America, and we do test drive events all over the country, and that's sort of our mantra, is like, you can talk to people about EVs all day, but butts in seats, put the pedal down, and then they're like, oh, I get it. Now I get it.
Well, I think that's true if it's a Tesla. So I think if it's a Nissan Leaf, it's not the same thing. So not to say the Leaf's bad.
I would disagree with you on that. I had a Kia Soul EV, like I said. I loved it to death. Gave tons of people test drives in it, and even that, they loved it. It's smooth, it's quiet, and it's fast. It is.
How many of those people went out and bought a Kia Soul the next day?
Most of them were people my age who can't quite afford
That's fair.
cars, so.
No, to that question, though, I think it's important to, like, an electric car is not for me, and the response I would give that is a car for you? I mean, because in reality, the product that people are buying into is not a car. I think it's very important for the industry to be honest to itself, is we are changing people's habits with fuel. They still want cars. 17 million brand new cars were sold last year in the United States. We want our percentage, the ones that run on electricity, to go up. Every time we've all bought cars in our entire lives, it's always been two products we're buying into: gasoline and the car we buy. And the gasoline's been in the background unconsciously. Didn't matter what you bought. But now in a dealership, they have to explain a new fuel type. Now to your friend, you have to explain a new fuel type. So cars are, yes, you love cars. Well, you're going to love cars that run on electric fuel. They're faster. They're more powerful. The fuel's cheaper. You can do it at home. And man, that shit is everywhere. So plug in. Have fun.
And hang on, I got to stick up for my Leaf again. So I take plenty of people for test drives in my Leaf. And I'm like, hey, I bought this car used for $9,000. And the Leaf has plenty of kick in it, too. It's not a Tesla, but it's still a great car.
A $9,000 car that operates like a Leaf, I think is badass. I think that's I'll give you that.
Well, so I'm in a process of trying to convince my dad to go electric. And one of the many objections that he has is insurance cost differences between combustion cars and electric cars. I was wondering if you could make a comment on that.
I think it's pretty similar to similar price cars. There is some rumors out there that it's more expensive to fix Teslas, but I asked that question to an auto body shop that the local Denver Tesla Club does a lot of business with and partners with, and they were like, no, they work on Porsches, BMWs, and Teslas, and they said, no, it's equally priced in terms of repair cost. And I mean, I can speak for myself personally with my Tesla. I don't think there was a huge increase in price when I got the Tesla versus what I had previously.
Yeah, and from my personal experience, when my mom traded in her VW Jetta Hybrid for a Model 3, her insurance went down. And so I've heard that from a lot of people, and some people say maybe it goes up a little bit, stays relatively the same. I think it depends a lot.
I think a good point to make is that we're getting back again. Somehow, some way, we've done a very good job of making the public think that electric cars are really different. And we started saying that, and I think that actually shot us in the foot. it's a car. And even from the insurance company's side, oftentimes they go, well, it's a car, it's a sedan, it's a SUV. So to your point, it doesn't really vary oftentimes all that much unless it's related to something that's maintenance, something like that.
I would also speak to the safety features of electric cars today. In many cases, they're going to have some sort of self-driving features or autopilot if it's Tesla, and it should actually be a safer car, which ultimately should help you avoid accidents and things like hitting deer on the road at 1 a.m.
A lot of people are concerned about electric cars that are supposed to explode or catch on fire, and I hear that often. That's what I'd like to hear.
If you're driving, go ahead, Chelsea.
We have 180,000 gas car fires in this country every single year.
Yes, gas cars, thank you. I was just going to say that. Gas cars catch fire and burn up all the time. When you're driving around with 15 gallons of gas in your car, that's a bomb. You're driving around with a bomb in your car. You know, it's electric cars. Yes, there is some remote chance that it'll catch fire in a really severe wreck. It's hard to talk to people about that rationally because then they just focus on what if I have a really severe wreck. But yeah, compared to like driving around with 15 gallons of gasoline, the risk is it's a pretty safe thing.
No, that's and we have to remember too is that they've never kind of thought of it that way, but to that point of like, oh, they could catch fire. It's like the entire time you're driving a gas-powered car, fire exists in front of your shins. Yeah. Like that's what's going on. But we've done a great job of, as a species of making a product that people said, oh, this works for us. So it's kind of bouncing back. We shouldn't attack them for saying that because again, they're skeptics. Skepticism is, I guess, warranted because it's different. But if you can remind them of, well, you've been driving something for maybe decades that actually does have little explosions going on all the time. This other one absolutely does not. So just again, keeping it simple in some ways. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is useful to provide perspective, no doubt, but we shouldn't be overly defensive about what are fair questions. I think the point at this stage is 10 years into this generation of electric cars, we don't yet have enough electric car fires to create data from them. We're still in anecdotal numbers. And so it's hard to provide studies and sources, but that's because there haven't been enough fires to make one.
Right. Well, and because Tesla is Tesla, when it happens with a Tesla, the T word gets headlines. So I figure if somebody came out with a combustion car called the Kardashian and it caught on fire every day, I think we'd probably see a lot of headlines about that. But
well, and the other important thing that I would mention to that is, the safety of the cars, on the other hand. So, like, you read about these Tesla fires, and I remember reading one where the guy, got a message on his screen that there was a problem. He had time to take the pens and coins out of his glove box before he got out of the car because you're not concerned that it's going to, there's like a gas tank beneath you. So the other safety features that are in the car, the passenger compartment, etc., is so important to counter that.
So one more, and then we'll wrap up.
We live in Southern California, and we don't get a lot of rain. So one day it did rain, and my coworker said, "Oh, you drive electric car? Is that safe? Are you going to get electrocuted?" I'm like, "Not more than you."
It parallels my stranger one that I keep hearing, or used to hear a lot, is that EVs are more likely to get struck by lightning.
Thank you to all our panelists for this talk. It would be utterly spiffing and magnificent if you could share this podcast with your friends and family, whatever way you would like to do that, however you do it. Say to them, you can do it verbally by saying, hey, you should listen to the Fully Charged Show podcast. It's really interesting. And don't forget to please leave us a 5-star rating and review on your favorite podcast player, as it helps us get discovered and increases our reach to spread the sustainability message. Clean tech. Sustainable technology, that's what it's really all about. And finally, don't forget to subscribe to our 2 YouTube channels, which includes Fully Charged Regen, which has these talks in video form. So now there are 4 reasons, I just want to list these quickly, 4 reasons to go to fullycharged.show, our webpage, which has become rather magnificently brilliant. So Fully Charged live tickets, local and international event tickets are available there. Our flagship UK show is now well into the advanced levels of organisation, and it is looking amazing. So do go and check out fullycharged.show to find out more about tickets. May the 1st, 2nd and 3rd of 2020 in Farnborough, which has a train station really near, and electric buses and Tesla taxis to take you from the train station to the venue, which is amazing. The venue is just brilliant. And it's so huge that if it's pouring with rain and really miserable, we can do everything inside. But if it isn't, we've got a massive car park outside with loads of other stuff going on. It's going to be wonderful. Next, our A to Z guide. If you're looking for wonderful suppliers and firms that pass the strict fully charged guidelines for sustainability and clean technology, check them out in our fabulous A to Z guide. I just thought that was, that's going to be like 3 things. It's packed with amazing stuff. Not cars, all the other stuff. Just stuff. Go and have a look. Fullycharged.show, the A to Z guide. Merchandise. Now, we have a brand new selection of sustainable merchandise on there as well. And don't worry, all sales profits go straight back into actually producing more shows and making them better. And managing the output in a more sustainable and eco-friendly way. And lastly, Patreon. A huge thank you to all our Patreon supporters, because we just wouldn't be able to keep making the stuff we do. We wouldn't be able to keep informing the world with our message. That's a rather grandiose way of saying making shows. All our support from Patreon goes directly into the production to make it bigger, better, and more varied. So if you'd like to support us, Patreon might be a good fit. And I think I've told you to subscribe. We'd love you to subscribe to the YouTube channels, but even if we'd be much happier if you didn't subscribe or do anything to anything, but just watched it. That would be great. And just listen to the podcast and tell your mates. That's more than enough. So, as always, if you have been, thank you for listening.